My name is Claire Morgan, and on the night I turned 52, my husband slid a manila folder across our dining table and said, "Sign it and get out." The candles on the Costco sheet cake still fizzed, where he'd blown them out. Blue icing that spelled "Happy Birthday, Mom" drooped. Chairs scraped. Laughter cut off. I didn't ask why. I opened the folder, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage No-Fault Property Division, that listed the house as his, though the mortgage had both our names and my overtime had saved more than one late month. He had highlighted the signature lines in yellow. He had chosen my birthday. That fact sat in my chest like a cold coin. The senses hoard small things. In a crisis, the barbecue smell from the slow cooker. The buzz of the football game, my new sweater's tag itching my neck. Ordinary details framing a decision meant to unmake a life. "Claire," he said, smooth for the crowd, "don't make this harder than it needs to be." It was his dealership voice, the one that had sold 1,000 trucks and soothed 1,000 complaints. I had mistaken that voice once for kindness. For years, I mistook noise for love. "I'll sign," I said. Across the table, my sister Ruth sucked in a breath. Someone's fork clicked on a plate. Our son Ethan wasn't there. He lives in Denver now, but I felt the empty shape of where he would have stood. The neighbor from 2 doors down whispered, "Is this really happening?" I have been a nurse for 30 years. I have threaded IVs into rolling veins and held hands when words failed. My hands know how to stay steady. They stayed steady then. I signed where the yellow wanted it. I dated it. I set the pen down gently, the way you set a syringe back on a tray. "Thank you," he said, as if I'd returned a borrowed item. I pushed back my chair. "I'll collect my things tomorrow." "You can leave the key on the counter," he answered, eyes skating from the cake to the door, anywhere but my face. He had rehearsed everything except courage. I moved through the kitchen. I wrapped 2 slices of cake in napkins because sugar is medicine after a shock and because I had baked that cake when he forgot to order one. I took my coat from the hook by the garage door. I did not slam anything. Some endings don't deserve applause. Outside, the air carried the iron smell of coming snow. Holiday lights blinked on the cul-de-sac. The world did not tilt. It kept breathing. I started the car and waited while the heater woke. Through the window, I saw silhouettes bend toward safer talk, relieved not to be on the stage. I don't blame them. People fear watching a life change because it reminds them theirs could too. I drove to the Pinecrest Inn off Route 7, the one with weekly rates and a sign whose P flickers like a failing heartbeat. The desk clerk slid a keycard across the counter without questions. "Room 214, he said. "Ice down the hall, coffee in the morning." The room smelled of lemon cleanser and old coffee. A thrift store lighthouse hung crooked over the bed. I ate my cake with a plastic fork from my purse. I showered until the mirror fogged and the knot between my shoulders loosened. The polyester bedspread crackled with winter static when I pulled it over me. I thought I would replay the scene. Exhaustion blanked me. Morning arrived with the housekeeping cart rattling past. I brewed harsh motel coffee and did the thing that has saved me all my adult life. I made a list. Call HR about benefits. Freeze the joint card. Open a new account at the credit union. Change passwords. Move direct deposit. Find an attorney who doesn't pose on billboards. Text Ruth. Tell Ethan, but not yet. Make sure my voice is steady. Hydrate. Breathe. Keep going. At noon, I crossed to the diner and ordered a hot turkey sandwich with gravy. A grandfather in a red cardigan blew out a candle on a slice of pie while his family sang. The waitress called me Han and topped me off. The bell on the door jingled. Life went on. Back in 214, I opened the folder again and read like a stranger. He had checked boxes as if filing a warranty claim. He expected me to leave with a suitcase and a dented dignity that would keep me quiet. He did not know, because he had never looked closely, that dignity can be polished. It shines brighter after storms. I paid for a week with my own card. Outside air sharpened. A freight train wailed beyond the strip mall. I let that sound travel through me, low, certain a line on a map connecting places I couldn't see yet. Back in the room, I spread my list beside the folder and drew arrows from one item to the next. The road appeared attorney bank mailbox passwords plan. My body knew what my mind still struggled to name. Control isn't the SUV, the handshake the show. Control is quiet. It's the vein you pick on the first try. It's the sentence you withhold. It's signing when you choose and leaving before anyone else decides how your story ends. I whispered the last item like a prayer, keep going. Under it, another line wrote itself older, steady your mind alone. Let them think you broke. Tomorrow you begin. That night the Weather Channel murmured about a front moving in from the plains. I set my alarm for 5 because nurses wake early even off shift. I slid the key card under the lamp so I wouldn't lose it. I turned off the light and listened to the building settle the plumbing sigh. A door hush shut ice clinking down the hall. Ordinary sounds. A life still here. I did not know yet that in 1 week, just after midnight, my phone would flare with 45 desperate calls. If I had known, I might have smiled. Instead, I counted breaths 4 and 6 out until my heart untangled. I slept, and the world kept turning toward morning. The morning after my birthday, I woke before the alarm in that motel bed, the polyester blanket tangled around my legs. For a few minutes, I lay there, staring at the crooked lighthouse picture on the wall, and let the silence settle. No dishwasher running, no voice in the hall, no one clattering through the kitchen. Just me breathing in a room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. It wasn't the life I had known for 30 years, but it was the life I had now. I got dressed in my scrubs even though I wasn't scheduled for a shift. Habit. Routine steadies you when the ground has buckled. I sat at the small desk, unfolded the divorce papers again, and laid my notepad beside them. My list from last night looked sharp under the motel lamp HR credit union passwords attorney. A nurse knows triage what bleeds, what waits, what saves. My marriage was gone. My job still stood. My savings needed fortification. The first call was to the hospital. I asked about continuing my health coverage. We'll walk you through COBRA if you need it, the HR woman said kindly. Her voice reminded me of the way I talk to patients waking up from anesthesia, gentle, steady, factual. Then I called the credit union and froze the joint account. Do you want to open one in your own name? The teller asked. Yes, I said, my voice as calm as if I were ordering lunch. By noon, I had an appointment with a family law attorney. The billboard lawyers with their toothy grins weren't for me. I found a woman named Janet who had practiced in town for 30 years. Bring everything you have, she said. Don't sign anything else until I see it. When I left the motel, the sky hung low with gray, the kind that smells like snow. I drove past the house where my birthday had been ruined. Lights still twinkled on the porch. His truck sat in the driveway. For a moment, I pictured myself walking up demanding answers. But what good would that do? He'd already shown me who he was. My job now was to protect who I was. At Janet's office, framed diplomas lined the wall. She wore a navy blazer and no nonsense on her face. I handed her the folder. She read silently, pen tapping against the margin. He's trying to claim full rights to the house. That's not going to fly. You've both paid into it for decades. He can't erase you with a highlighter. Something eased inside me at her words. For weeks, maybe months, I had felt the drip of his disdain comments about my hours, my paycheck, my gray hairs. And now a stranger with a law degree was confirming what I had almost forgotten my labor counted. My presence mattered. Janet explained the steps discovery negotiations may be a hearing. Don't panic, she said. You've built a solid life. That's your leverage. He can't take what you've earned. That night back at the motel, I let myself exhale. I microwaved leftover turkey from the diner and scribbled more on my notepad. Step by step, the fog was clearing. But grief is sly. It doesn't just vanish because you've hired an attorney. In the quiet hours, I still felt the sting of betrayal. 30 years together, and he couldn't even wait until after the cake to humiliate me. He had planned it the way some men plan a fishing trip or a surprise party. That fact burrowed deep. I wrote in my journal, they think I've broken. Let them. I will rebuild louder in silence. The next morning, I packed up my room at the Pinecrest Inn. I could keep paying week to week, but I needed something steadier. I found a small rental over the credit union, a one-bedroom with linoleum floors and a view of the post office. It wasn't much, but the lease was in my name only, and that mattered more than granite countertops or cathedral ceilings. Neighbors nodded as I carried boxes up the narrow stairs. A retired couple lived across the hall. The wife, Dottie, brought over a plate of peanut butter cookies. "We thought you might need something sweet," she said. My eyes filled before I could stop them. Sometimes kindness stings more than cruelty because it reminds you what you've missed. At work, colleagues noticed. "Rough night," one asked, as I adjusted an IV. "Rough month," I replied. They didn't pry. Nurses learned to respect silence. But one younger nurse slipped a sticky note into my pocket at the end of shift. It said, "You are stronger than you think." By Friday, I had moved enough into my new place to make it feel mine a quilt from my mother Ethan's high school photo on the dresser, a jar of coffee on the counter. I lit a candle, brewed a pot, and sat with the hum of traffic below. The world didn't end because he left. In fact, maybe it was beginning again. And still his voice lingered. Sign it and get out. Some phrases burn into the brain like tattoos. I carried that one like a scar. But I carried something else too. The memory of my own hand, steady on the pen, calm on the page, strong enough to write a new story. That weekend, I mailed copies of documents to Janet. I checked my new bank account. I set up online bill pay. Each click felt like a small reclaiming. I wasn't rushing revenge. I was laying a foundation. Quiet, deliberate, patient. That is how you survive. That is how you win. As snow fell on Sunday night, I pulled my quilt-tight phone charging on the nightstand. I thought of Ethan and Denver Ruth across town, my co-workers, even Dottie with her cookies. Life was still threaded with people who cared. He had tried to strip me of dignity in one gesture. But dignity, I realized, lives where you tend it. And I was tending mine. I didn't know that the first missed call would come just days later, that a man who once sneered in triumph would beg in panic. For now, I only knew this silence was my armor patience, my weapon, and tomorrow was mine to claim. On Monday, I climbed the narrow stairs to my new apartment with a mop in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. The hallway smelled like floor wax and old mail. I set the bag on the counter and began to clean. Before you plan anything big, you clean. I started with the kitchen. Hot water cut the grease from the cabinets. I lined 2 drawers with newspaper and set out 2 plates, 2 bowls, 2 mugs. I don't need more, I told myself. Simplicity keeps the noise down. I tested the smoke detector and wrote battery on my list. Then I swept the linoleum and opened the small window over the sink. From here I could see the post office flag and the brick-back wall of the credit union. Next came the bedroom. I pulled my mother's quilt from a box and smoothed the stitched stars as if they were old friends. Ethan's photo went on the dresser. He's 27 now, the same stubborn cowlick from middle school. I hadn't told him about the divorce yet. Soon I promised the picture, when I can speak without teaching you to be bitter. Work was the spine of my plan. The hospital needs hands at 3 a.m. I picked up an extra shift Friday overnight on telemetry. The charge nurse Brenda studied me with that practical tenderness nurses carry like an extra instrument. "You sure?" she asked. I'm sure I said. Purposeful fatigue is kinder than worry. When you help others stitch a life back together, you remember your own can be stitched too. Janet called between admissions. "I filed our appearance," she said. "Financial disclosures requested. If he reaches out about property, forward it to me. Document everything." "Documenting is what I do," I answered, glancing at a chart. Heart rhythm regular, pain 2 of 10, ambulating with assistance. We both laughed, 2 women who use paperwork as armor. On my lunch break, I opened a fresh email account he didn't know. I set up a secure folder for scans. On the way home, I bought a fireproof safe and tucked in my passport social security card and a thumb drive with copies of tax returns, mortgage statements, insurance policies. I was safeguarding. "Money is a river," I wrote. "You dam leaks and shape the flow." I canceled a streaming service we never used and set automatic transfers to savings the minute my paycheck landed. I left $20 in a jar for small treats. Revenge that starves the revenger tastes like ash. This would be steady fuel. Around dinner time, Dottie knocked with beef stew and frontier wisdom. "Men who humiliate you in public end up begging in private," she said, handing me a bowl. My first husband tried to make me small once. By Christmas, he was leaving apologies under my wiper, she said. Dignity travels. After dishes and a bath hot enough to chase the day from my bones, I looked again at the yellow highlights on the papers and traced the road ahead. Lockdown health insurance, secure housing, defend assets. And this part felt like treason. Though it was simply wisdom, build a life that needed nothing from him. I didn't picture speeches. I pictured balance sheets that couldn't be tipped with a thumb. I pictured a spine that didn't bend when someone barked an order. When sleep wouldn't come, I wrote the story I wanted. Not mansions or beaches, just a good American life shifts. I choose cooking for friends, after church, a community college class because learning keeps a mind limber. I wrote, by a used dining table with leaves for holidays I host. The pen slowed on that line, holidays I host. The words felt like faith. In the morning, Ruth texted, you don't have to be brave alone. Coffee at Donnelly's. Ruth squeezed my hand. Say the thing you're afraid to say. I'm relieved I said. Under the hurt, there's relief. Of course, she replied. Being disrespected every day is labor. You just got laid off. We laughed and tears came anyway. At the hospital later, I caught a near fall with a gait belt. The patient's knees buckled. My body remembered how to ride the weight down until the chair met them. As the monitor found its rhythm, I thought, this is what I'm doing for myself, catching the collapse, guiding it to a safe landing. Midweek, Janet called again. Preliminary numbers show he's leveraged, she said, more than his swagger suggests. Last quarter hit the dealership hard. Nothing illegal so far, but sloppy. Sloppy is what you can't afford when you detonate a marriage. Sloppy leaves fingerprints. Fingerprints leave trails. I thanked her and wrote, let him be sloppy. I will be precise. That evening, I went to the library and sat under a brass lamp reading about retirement accounts, QDROs, tax penalties, dull stones for a solid path. A teenage boy hunched over algebra while a young mother bounced a fussy toddler. Brick by brick, we were all building futures. On the way home, I passed a consignment store and saw an oak table with 2 leaves leaning like tall cousins against the wall. We can deliver Friday, the clerk said. I paid from an envelope labeled, for something good. Back in my apartment, I slid the safe under the bed and boiled water for tea. I set Do Not Disturb after 9 and turned off message previews. Boundaries are fences for your own livestock. They keep the herd from wandering into jaws. Before sleep, I looked out at the flag over the post office loading dock. I said aloud, you are safe here. Then I corrected myself. I am safe here. The plan was not to hurt him. The plan was to heal me so thoroughly that another person's chaos could no longer infect the bloodstream of my days. I turned off the lamp. The building hummed pipes ticking a refrigerator, purring distant traffic, whispering. A car door shut downstairs. The world settled, and I felt it settle in me. The first stones were down. The path would hold. And when the night of 45 calls finally came, I would know exactly which phone settings to use, which words to choose, and which silence to keep. The first time the phone lit up, it was a little after midnight on a Tuesday. I had been asleep under my mother's quilt, the radiator clanking in protest against the February cold. The ringtone buzzed against the nightstand, loud enough to cut through even the dreams of a tired nurse. Unknown number. I silenced it, rolled over, pulled the blanket tight. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Then again. By the time the clock blinked, 12:45, I counted 12 missed calls. By 1 a.m., there were 20. By 2:45. I sat up, finally, heart pounding. The glow of the screen painted the room in pale blue. I didn't need to guess who. I tapped the voicemail icon and held the phone to my ear. His voice, once slick with confidence, now cracked and desperate. Claire, please, you have to pick up. Something's gone wrong at the dealership. The bank's pulling the line of credit. I can't fix this without you. Call me back, please, for God's sake. Another message, they're threatening to sue. I need access to the joint account. Claire, where are you? Answer me. And another ragged with panic. If you don't help me, I'll lose everything. You don't understand. I can't do this alone. I sat very still, phone pressed to my knee, listening to the words loop in my head. I thought of that night at the dining table, candles, flickering on the cake I'd bought for myself, his hand pushing the folder across the frosting, his voice commanding, sign it and get out. 45 calls, 45 reminders that life turns. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood brewed coffee in the tiny kitchen and stared out at the post office flag, shivering in the wind. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. By morning, the calls slowed. At work, I moved through the ward, steady as ever, charting vitals, adjusting meds, offering comfort. Colleagues noticed the calm, but they didn't know about the storm behind my phone screen. Every buzz in my pocket reminded me he was unraveling, and I was not. Janet confirmed it the next day. He's leveraged to the hilt. The bank's filing notice. Creditors circling. He's desperate. She paused. He'll probably try to reach you again. Don't engage. Forward everything to me. That night the phone lit up once more. I watched it glow steady and frantic. I didn't pick up. Silence was my answer. I remembered Ruth's words over coffee. Being disrespected every day is labor. You just got laid off. And I thought tonight it isn't me working overtime to hold a marriage together. Tonight it's him sweating through panic calls that go unanswered. When dawn came, I tucked the phone into the drawer, poured another cup, and wrote in my journal, "Revenge doesn't need noise. Sometimes it's just watching them drown in the silence you've built." When I was a girl, my mother taught me that steadiness can be louder than shouting. She kept a small ledger in the kitchen drawer pencil, worn to a nub, and every Friday she'd sit at the Formica table and reconcile the weak milk gas church envelope, the $5 she called rain money. I learned to love the quiet authority of numbers lining up. Later, when nursing consumed my days, I kept that same habit in the small hours after a double shift, a legal pad, a cup of tea columns that gave shape to chaos. People think nurses only hold hands and push meds, but most nights were half carpenter, half accountant, shoring up failing structures, allocating what's left. That habit was how I first saw the Fishers in our marriage. In the early years, the dealership was modest. He sold used pickups and 2-year leases promised to take care of the good folks who put food on our table. I believed him. He believed himself. Back then, he brought me deposit slips and asked me to just look because money frightened him like blood frightened some patients. I took a community college course in small business accounting so I could help him. Ask smart questions at the bank. I learned what a line of credit was, how inventory financing worked, why you never spend the tax remittance. When he forgot, I remembered. That first winter, we almost lost the shop to a slow quarter. It was my overtime and a gently worded email to the bank manager that bought us another 90 days. He called me a lifesaver at dinner and kissed my forehead like you thank a lucky charm. Time changes a person the way drip lines cut through rock. When the lot grew, he stopped bringing me the slips. He hired a cousin to do the books, a man who waved away reconciliations and cited aggressive growth strategy when a supplier invoice went missing. The cousin called my questions nurse numbers as if care made math weaker. At home, the language shifted. When I asked, did we pay the payroll tax, he answered, we. When I asked, do you want me to look at the floor plan statement, he smiled and said, I've got professionals now. The first time I knew arrogance had replaced gratitude was the night he bought a boat. Not a rowboat. A fiberglass showpiece with a name scripted in gold along the stern. We had a decent year, but not boat good. I held the finance sheet in my lap and said, this is thin. He laughed and told a story about a rival dealer who would choke on envy when he saw us nose out of the marina. That rival went bankrupt last summer. I don't know if boats were to blame, but I know boats aren't flotation devices when you drill holes in your own hull. There were other signs persistent as beeps on a monitor, vendor calls returning after hours, interest-only payments stretching beyond their intended season, the payroll company flagging a late transfer. He brushed them off with a salesman's grin and a new watch. I stopped asking. It's a terrible thing the way love can teach you to go quiet in your own house. At work, I grew into roles that asked for more backbone than showmanship. On nights, the charge nurse trusted me with the messy stuff, the combative post-op, the family that needed hard truth, spoken gently, the resident who hadn't learned yet that watch and wait is sometimes the bravest order. I became the one people called when veins hid or tempers frayed. With age, I got better at telling the difference between a crisis and a tantrum. A dealership in a tantrum throws a birthday divorce. A dealership in a crisis calls its creditors before they call you. It would be simple to paint myself as a secret tycoon waiting in the wings. I am not. I am a working woman with a respectable retirement account, a tidy emergency fund, and a mind that can smell rot under fresh paint. But I did have one other thing, something he never asked about because he didn't know how to value it. A reputation earned over decades with the kind of people who run quiet power in a town. Bank managers, HR directors, pastors, who chair food, pantry boards, the head of the union at the plant, who sees which families are sliding toward eviction before the notices go out. The side of America that doesn't make speeches, just shows up with clipboards and casseroles. I showed up. They noticed. That network mattered during the last recession. When hours were cut and our mortgages trembled, I organized a Saturday clinic table in the church hall, blood pressure checks, and medication counseling free coffee if you sat long enough to hear about sliding scale dental. The credit union manager spoke about budgeting with a whiteboard and a modest grin. The line for the food pantry wound down the hall, and no one pretended not to be there. In that season, my husband softened grateful for steady paychecks and my habit of packing leftovers into labeled containers. Gratitude is a discipline. Arrogance is a luxury purchased on credit. When the economy recovered, he forgot which one had saved us. When he slid the folder across our birthday table, he wasn't just ending a marriage. He was firing the one person who had ever read the fine print of his life without charging a fee. He did it in front of witnesses because he believed humiliation made the blow cleaner. What it did was sharpen me. After I moved into the apartment over the credit union, I took stock of what remained my license, my health, my paycheck, my son, my sister, the friends whose kindness never asked for a return receipt, and the old ledger habit. I listed assets the law would recognize and assets the law would not. The law would tally the house and the retirement accounts. It would not tally the relationship I had with the woman at the bank who had watched me volunteer, the trust the HR director placed in me, to orient new nurses, the pastor who had my number, for when a family needed a blood pressure cuff at midnight. But those things counted too. They didn't buy things. They opened doors when something needed to be said to someone who could move a lever you didn't even know existed. I thought of Ethan, who once watched me repair a vacuum with a roll of tape and 2 paper clips. You can fix anything, he said, 11 years old and astounded. Not anything I corrected. But most things can be made sound enough to hold until help arrives. This, I realized, was what I was doing with myself, making sound enough to hold. So when the 45 calls came, I didn't answer, because I recognized the sound not of repentance, but of someone who had always outsourced steadiness, needing a rush delivery. I waited until morning and called Janet. I forwarded the voicemails. I made notes, Times caller ID screenshots. Control is quiet, I wrote under my mother's quilt. Power is patient. Dignity is compound interest. That week, the credit union manager waved me into her office when I stopped by to notarize a form. You've been on my mind, she said. If you need a bridge, we can talk. You've always done right by us. I thanked her and said I was stable. Walking out, I felt a small, fierce gratitude that had nothing to do with winning and everything to do with worth. The kind they try to take when they center you in a spectacle and tell you to sign. At the hospital, a new resident asked me how to convince a stubborn patient to accept a walker. You don't convince, I said. You show the bruise blooming on tomorrow's hip if they insist on pride today. I heard my own advice and smiled. Pride had been my husband's walker. He didn't see tomorrow's bruise until it flowered purple under a banker's thumb. The night before the hearing date came in the mail, I pulled my mother's ledger from the drawer. I ran my pencil down the page and totaled what I could count, then sat in the quiet and took stock of what I could not. I understood finally the shape of my leverage. It wasn't the threat of scandal or the promise of revenge. It was that I had built a life that stood on its own joists, plumb and square. You cannot bully a house like that. You cannot shame it out of alignment. I closed the ledger and turned off the lamp. Somewhere a train blew its long, low note, as if to underline the line I'd just written in my head. Tomorrow, when he asks for rescue, I will choose the kind of saving that saves me too. The dealership's collapse didn't come all at once like a roof caving in. It came in creaks and groans, the kind of noises you don't notice until a beam gives way. And now those noises were everywhere. The local paper ran a small story, Community Auto Group Faces Financial Strain. Most folks in town skimmed it, but I read between the lines. inventory unpaid creditors, filing liens, rumors of bounced payroll checks. It was everything Janet had warned me about. Meanwhile, his calls didn't stop. Not just late-night begging, but frantic daytime messages, the kind that slipped past pride. Claire, I know you've still got connections at the bank. Please talk to them for me. They'll listen to you. I forwarded them all to Janet. She called me one afternoon and said he's unraveling publicly now. The more desperate he gets, the less leverage he has. Hold steady. The strangest part was how quickly word spread. At the hospital, co-workers whispered near the vending machines. Did you hear about the dealership? Can't believe it. At the grocery store, the cashier lowered her voice. Is it true he laid off half the salesmen? I just nodded, bagging apples, letting the gossip float past me. People like a fall from grace, especially when arrogance once strutted through every Rotary luncheon and county fair. By Thursday, he showed up outside my apartment building. I saw his truck idling at the curb as I came home from my shift. He got out face-pale hair, uncombed a man who hadn't slept. Claire, he started hands out like I might run. Please, just 5 minutes. I kept my key in my hand. You chose your stage when you humiliated me in front of everyone. This sidewalk isn't mine. I was wrong, he said, voice breaking. But you know the books. You know the people. You can save this. If you don't, he choked on the words, I'll lose everything. For a moment, I saw the man I married, shoulders sagging under the weight of life, not pride. But memory is a sharp tool. I remembered his smirk as he slid the papers across my birthday cake, the gasps, my own steady hand signing under his spotlight. You already lost, I told him quietly. You just didn't notice until the lights went out. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Janet handles everything now. Talk to her. His mouth opened like he might argue, but no sound came. For the first time, his silence was louder than his voice. The next day, a foreclosure notice appeared in the public records. His empire, built on borrowed bravado, was crumbling brick by brick. And I still had my job, my quilt, my ledger. I still had peace. The public unraveling was underway. People who once envied him now pitied him. And the man who told me to get out had finally been left outside himself. They scheduled the hearing in a courtroom that smelled like old books and lemon oil. The benches were polished smooth by decades of worried hands. I arrived early with Janet, who wore her navy blazer and that calm that makes you want to sit up straighter. Across the aisle, he sat with his cousin, the bookkeeper, who never believed in reconciliations, both of them whispering into a folder as if secrets could be reshuffled like playing cards. The clerk called cases one after another, a landlord dispute, a custody matter, a traffic appeal. Ordinary lives crossing the wooden threshold, hoping for a ruling that would make sense of a mess. When our names were called, we rose. The judge, a woman with gray hair, pulled into a low bun, glanced over the file, and then over us, weighing in seconds what had taken years to come apart. Janet spoke first. Your Honor, we are here on the property division and temporary support. Opposing counsel is proposing an inequitable split based on a claim that the marital home and related assets are exclusively his despite joint contributions over 3 decades and a long history of my client's support, both financial and practical, to the dealership, whose debts now largely derive from his decisions. His attorney stood clearing his throat. Your Honor, my client established the business prior to the marriage, expanded it on his own initiative, and has carried the household costs predominantly for years. The downturn is temporary and unrelated to any wrongdoing. The judge paged through exhibits in measured silence. Ms. Morgan, she said at last, looking up at me, you've been a nurse for 30 years. Yes, Your Honor. Consistent income. Yes. Any interruptions? 2 short leaves, one when our son was born, one when my mother died. She nodded. And you contributed to the mortgage. I did. To household expenses. Yes. Any involvement in the business finances. I felt his eyes like pins, but truth is easier to carry than fear. I helped with budgeting in the early years. I took a course at community college so I could ask informed questions. When they hired someone else, I stopped. But I continued to cover bills when the shop had lean months. I also managed our taxes and insurance. We made decisions together until we did not. Janet offered bank statements, tax returns, the kind of papers that speak without adjectives. The judge studied them. Across the aisle, he shifted jaw tight. When the judge asked about recent events, credit lines withdrawn, payroll delays, opposing counsel tried to frame them as economic weather. But sloppy bookkeeping leaves a smell even under lemon oil. The judge's questions pierce like a needle finding a vein. Where are the remittance receipts? Why did the line of credit float inventory beyond the agreed cap? And why, sir, did you file for divorce on your wife's birthday during a gathering of friends and neighbors? His attorney objected to relevance. The judge overruled. It speaks to good faith, she said, or lack thereof. He stared down at the table. It was a mistake, he muttered. The judge's voice softened, not kind, but human. We all make mistakes. Today we sort their consequences. Testimony concluded. The judge took a brief recess. In the hallway, fluorescent lights hummed, and a vending machine clunked a spiraling bag of pretzels into place. He approached Alone's shoulders, slumped, as if gravity had been turned up just for him. Claire, he said almost a whisper, please, talk to the bank. They trust you. Tell them I can make it right. I held my file like a shield, cardboard thin, but backed by something denser, spine ledger lines, the long memory of a woman who knows what her work is worth. The bank doesn't need my testimony to assess your numbers, I said, and you don't need my kindness to learn your lesson. He swallowed. I know I hurt you. You humiliated me, I corrected, because precision is an act of mercy too. You chose spectacle over decency. You told me to sign and get out on my birthday. Right now you're asking for rescue in a hallway because your audience has dwindled. That's not contrition. That's panic. The bailiff called us back. We took our places. The judge returned with a ruling that landed like a deep breath after a long-hold equitable division of the House. Proceeds temporary support pegged to current incomes. A freeze on the sale of key assets pending a full accounting. She ordered discovery that would pry up floorboards and see what crawled beneath. Mr. Morgan, she said, eyes steady. If your business is sound, these disclosures will show it. If it is not, you will not be permitted to shield debts behind bravado or to shift blame onto the spouse who labored beside you for 30 years. This court expects candor. It also expects respect in public and in private. He nodded to the table instead of the judge. Old habits. The gavel didn't fall. She simply moved us on to next steps which felt fitting. Lives don't end with a dramatic bang. They continue with calendars and compliance. Outside on the steps, winter sunlight made the granite spark. Reporters weren't waiting. This was not that kind of case. But a few former employees hovered near the bottom. 2 of the salesmen he'd let go. Their hands jammed in coat pockets, faces part worry, part vindication. One nodded at me in a way that said both I'm sorry and we saw it coming. He followed me onto the landing. So that's it, he said. You're just going to walk away while everything burns. I turned. The wind lifted my hair, and for a beat I saw us, as we must look from across the street, 2 middle-aged people on courthouse steps, another American story of ambition and pride, and the stubborn endurance of those who don't have time for either. I thought of my patients who didn't get the surgery they wanted, but learned to live well with what could be fixed. I thought of my mother's ledger, of Dottie's cookies, of the flag over the post office and the train's long note across town. I thought of 45 calls in the thin blue light of 2 a.m. No, I said evenly. I'm not walking away while everything burns. I'm walking toward what will not burn. And I'm not your fire department. His mouth opened, searching for a sale that never formed. He reached for an old script. Claire, please. I lifted my hand the way I do when a patient needs a firm boundary disguised as kindness. No, I said, and then let the words find their mirror. You remember that night at our table, you slid a folder across a cake and told me, sign it and get out. I held his gaze, not unkind, just finished. Today, in front of the people who matter, I'm returning your courtesy. We're done here. Sign what the court requires and get out of my way. For a heartbeat, the air around us held still as if the town itself were listening for a verdict. He stepped back. Not a theatrical stumble, just the honest retreat of someone who has finally met the end of a line. Janet touched my sleeve, a gentle steer toward the sidewalk where the world kept moving. A woman pushing a stroller, a man with a takeout bag, a teenager on a skateboard, zigzagging between sun and shadow. The salesman gave me small, grateful smiles. I nodded back. We were all in our separate ways learning to proceed. At the bottom step, I paused and looked up at the courthouse cornice, a row of carved leaves catching light that had traveled 93 million miles to rest on stone. I exhaled and felt the breath leave clean. Revenge, it turns out, isn't the sharp laugh or the pointed speech. It's the quiet arrival at a door that closes behind you with the soft click of a lock you now hold. We walked to the corner where Janet would peel off toward her office, and I would aim myself toward the hospital toward a night shift that would ask my hands for the same steadiness they had offered through every turn of this season. Across the street, the post office flag cracked in the wind. The town kept breathing. So did I. Winter slid into spring, and with it came the final act of our unraveling. The dealership's sign still stood on Main Street, but half the lot was empty. Where rows of gleaming trucks once gleamed, now sat weeds poking through cracked asphalt. Customers stopped coming. Creditors stopped waiting. His bravado stopped working. I heard about the collapse in whispers first. A woman in the cafeteria at work said she'd driven by and seen repossession crews hauling off inventory. Someone else said paychecks bounced. Even Dottie from across the hall, who never left her apartment, much leaned in one afternoon and whispered, "Honey, his empire's gone. They say the bank padlocked the doors." And still the phone buzzed. Calls, messages, pleas. He shifted from anger to bargaining to despair. "Claire, you have to help me. You know people at the credit union. They trust you. Just tell them I'll make it right. Please." But every word only reminded me of that night, the candles, the cake, the humiliation. The public unraveling came to a head at a creditors' meeting. Janet insisted I attend not to gloat, but to witness. I sat in the back as he faced rows of bankers, suppliers, and laid-off employees. His once-practiced sales voice trembled. Sweat stained his collar. For years he had strutted through this town like a king of chrome and concrete. Now he stood small under fluorescent lights, a man who thought debt was power and pride was armor. When he spotted me in the crowd, his face blanched. The man who had ordered me to sign and get out could barely meet my eyes. He knew what I knew. His empire had depended on my steadiness all along. Without it, he was paper in the rain. Later outside on the courthouse steps, he staggered toward me. "Claire," he said, almost breaking, "don't leave me like this. I need you." I thought of every patient I'd ever cared for, every bruise, every broken bone, every moment where pain was answered with calm hands. But some wounds aren't mine to mend. I looked at him steady and clear. "You left me on my birthday in front of everyone with nothing but a pen and a folder, and now you want me back to fix the mess you made? No." His knees buckled as though the truth itself was too heavy. Before he would have spun it into drama. Now silence was all he had left. That night I went home, lit a candle, and wrote in my journal, "Dignity doesn't scream. It endures." His collapse is not my revenge, it is simply gravity finally catching up. Public unraveling had turned into public ruin, and I was still standing.